Hey, deserving listeners. So I thought I would go over the results of the survey, the poll that I sent out to y'all about your attitudes and feelings about Love is Blind Season 8. Let's get into it. There were 126 responses, and the first question I asked y'all about is who you liked and disliked. And there was an option to not say either way, which either meant that you were indifferent about the person or just weren't willing to commit one way or the other, or you didn't remember the person maybe. But the first four people to look at here is that a lot of people overwhelmingly did not like Dave, but a small minority of people did like Dave, which scans in terms of my understanding of the reaction from the group or from the audience. And is it understandable? Yeah. Me personally, it takes a lot for me to say that I don't like someone as a therapist, but even as a citizen, really. But does Dave deserve criticism for the way that he approached his relationship with Lauren on a number of levels in terms of what we've talked about? Just some highlights are that there's a lot of evidence, even from him, that he should not have gone on the show because he was not ready to get married. I think one hypothesis that is viable is that he thought maybe it would work out, but he was trying to push himself to grow in a number of ways. One, to start thinking about long-term relationships in a way that he hadn't before, to break free of at least his perceived enmeshment and coercive emotional control of his family. He needed to be actually not reachable, right? Because that's one of the features of the pod and the getaway is that you don't have your phone. So I think he was legitimately and maybe in a healthy way trying to do that, but ultimately I think he would have a hard time saying yes to the question, do you predict that if you did get engaged that you would actually go through with the wedding? I think he would know that would be no. Or at the very least he would say, well, I would hope so, but this is so overwhelming to me that I can't imagine that happening. And he basically said as much. So you could dislike him for that because that just ruined Lauren's time in the pods at the very least. Another thing you could criticize him for is that he was immaturely jealous about the possibility or the fact that Lauren had dated a couple guys prior to the pods and Dave knew of them or something. And also that one of the guys was claiming that they were boyfriend-girlfriend when there was clearly a lot of evidence that that wasn't true, even from Lauren herself, but also Lauren's friends, which, you could say that they're biased, but they presented a pretty good case. And we only had this one guy's account that was convincing Dave's friends, and we don't even know if Dave's friends were really being convinced of it, but we don't know. And the fact that Dave just didn't look into it really, he didn't seem to care to look into it, and was shaming Lauren or blaming Lauren even. And even the way that he broke up with Lauren, he was basically claiming that he had no choice or that it wasn't him that broke up with her. And I've talked at length about what I would hypothesize with a client that presented like this. It's not psychopathic, it's not narcissistic. It is a result of dependency and dependent personality and incompetency schema and enmeshment and underfunctioning and codependency and Anyway, I've been over that already. So it's still hurtful and weird and bothersome, but it's not a volitional mission that he went on necessarily. So you could absolutely criticize him for that. The fact that he didn't introduce Lauren, give her a chance, but I don't think he was actually wanting to move forward, not out of some nefarious clout chasing, but out of just like utter terror of the whole situation. You could also criticize him for, at the reunion, claiming that he did give the letter to his sister. The way he claimed to have done that was extremely dubious and looked like he was lying on the spot, which was weird. I can't know that, of course, but it just kind of had that look to it. And I think Lauren actually seemed to believe that as well. She didn't indicate that verbally, but her facial expression, at least the way I was reading it, was at least to be skeptical of the way he was responding. But I suspect a lot of people dislike Dave because they think that he did all that on purpose, which is possible. People will say that upon meeting Lauren in the hallway, he wasn't attracted to her and then just proceeded to figure out some excuse not to be with her. It could be, which if that were the case, then yikes, big time. Lauren is very well liked. Actually, what I should be doing is comparing this to the previous poll. So let's look at that. Okay, so this is the end of season poll. And then if we toggle to the mid-season, so this is after episode 9. So this is after the getaway. And we see that Dave got a little bit of movement, if you will. In the very beginning, very few people liked Dave. But at the end of the season, he won a few people over, but not significantly. Lauren had a switch from mid-season of being, mostly liked, pretty well liked compared to other cast members, to being very liked. Still, a group of people, 15 out of 126, so that's about 12%, did not like Lauren. So that's saying something. And then if we go mid-season so if we just think about for Lauren, and I've talked about how overall Lauren seems like the most mature stand-up person. Might there be other mature stand-up people, like Molly, for example? Yeah, but we just didn't get enough data, especially as much as we got from Lauren. I mean, just all the ways that she reacted. Some people might say she should have left him right away, and okay, but I think that's unrealistic. And when you fall in love, you fall in love. And also, if you're in love and you think that this is going to last forever, then you shouldn't just drop someone at the first sign of something going wrong. So, she played it out and drew a boundary when it was clear that, he broke up with her, but she seemed like she was pretty much done. And there's that. Anyway, and the way that she talked about him at the reunion, I very much appreciated. She said that he was immature, and she was clear, like when Dave was telling the story of we were kind of hung up on something, and Lauren chimes in, we? He says, okay, So she was standing up for herself. She was not being a wet blanket, and she also was not going over the top, at the very least diplomatically, but I think legitimately that as a differentiated, mature individual that Lauren is, she didn't come with a bunch of data points that were dubious. She was clear that Dave is a good person and doesn't deserve to be bullied, which is very commendable. So Lauren won a lot of fans later on, and I'm a bit confused as to why people didn't like her in the beginning. It's like about a fourth of people. And then Molly, mid-season, interesting, went from dislike, just a couple more people liked, but, pretty much like we could just say that a number of people were indifferent. And so about a third of people liked, a third of people were indifferent, and a third of people disliked. That was drastically different by the end of the season. Molly might actually be the most liked person. For good reason. The way that she reacted in the pods when she got dumped, she went right to Lauren and said, oh my God, I've been talking about he's my number one, and that must have been really annoying for you. For Molly in that stress and that grief to be selfless is a huge deal. And then at the all-cast party, she goes after Dave in a fair way, I thought. There's a way to go after someone in a unfair, hostile manner. And, she was pretty straight with him and wasn't hostile, wasn't unfair, wasn't accusing him of things really, and was just saying, I don't understand. Molly, of anyone, was, in terms of other seasons, would have been the least likely person to do that. The Mollys of the show are either neutral or they're trying to get with Dave. It's like, I heard that he's... And, there's some wiggle room there of possibilities in past seasons or whatever. But again, Molly selflessly and doubles down at the all-cast party, pulls Lauren aside and says, hey, I just want to tell you that I'm sorry again, and no hard feelings from my side, and, I care about you, and da-da-da. So there's that. At the reunion, from my memory, Molly was, at the very least, didn't create any kind of issues and was also mature and I thought appropriate, in my opinion. And then if we look at the fourth individual here, we have Madison, who is similar to Molly, about a third indifferent, a third like, a third, maybe a little bit over a third like. And then we go to end of season, and not that much change, more opinions because fewer people were indifferent. In fact, very few people were indifferent, but the ratio is a little bit more in favor of Madison, which is interesting. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, Madison's weird. I feel like in every season there is a Madison, or often there is, who I think presents this canvas upon which we can all paint our own pictures on. That sounds funny, but or a screen that we can project onto. And I've reacted to Madison. I think she is a good person. I think she was misunderstood in the pods. I think she overreacted as well, which is normal for humans to do. And given her traumas, it makes sense. And also, she's already recovered a lot, and she talks about it and admits that kind of stuff to some extent. So, there's a lot of maturity and strength there. But I think that people like Madison, for a certain group of, a sizable group of the audience, they will see themselves in Madison and will latch onto her, identify with her. And I think for a percentage of those people, they will see everything that Madison does in a positive light. So I hope you hear that I'm saying that just because you identify with Madison doesn't mean that you distort Madison. It means that there's a higher likelihood of distorting everything that's happening. And so I think that seemingly was happening for some. There are some people that went, because there's no, and I've been over this already in my member videos. I was going to say there's no way to justify Madison breaking up with Mason the way that she did, and then to come back into the lounge and say breaking up with people, feels so good, tastes so good, and then to go to Meg and say he's a clown and pressure her to break up with Mason. And but when I reviewed it and watched it a second time, there is some minor justifications if we imagine what she was thinking at the time and how she was interpreting things, somewhat distorted, but also just somewhat based on the way that Mason was communicating and the things that he was doing, between Meg and Madison. I don't think Mason is a psychopathic jerkface, but I can see why Madison would have been in that direction. But I still think that was taking it a little far. And then at the reunion, the kinds of things that she had in her armpit were, I think, just not compelling. We don't know. I don't know, but I've already been over that already anyway. So I think that for some people to just 100% say that everything that Madison did was completely justified, I think is interesting to me, notable, but opposite as well. Absolutely. There's another group of people that, for various different reasons, sexism, or that you don't like people that talk, the whole trauma dumping thing. I went over that in my member videos. I did a whole lecture kind of spaced out over the different episodes about love bombing about trauma dumping. And so there are people that will attack Madison, that she's two-faced or that she was a vixen with Mason, constantly talking about sex, and with Alex she was like prim and proper. She's manipulating that's absurd to me. It's possible, but that is a very tired accusation that is bestowed upon women. And I think that was that, and just sex shaming, slut shaming, and sex negative and weird. I mean, the minimal sex talk between Madison and Mason is understandable because they are romantically and sexually attracted to each other, even through the pods, and presumably that's the plan moving forward. And so talking about sex and Halloween costumes and cream pies, like, absolutely above board on that way. And the vibe between Madison and Alex was just a little different and just didn't involve that. Have you dated more than one person before in the past? That happens. Anyway, So for Madison, she goes from, being divisive, I guess similar to Molly, to Madison having, a little bit more dislike by the end of the season. So since we didn't see her post pods aside from the reunion, then this must be because, presumably because of the reunion or because of podcasts that she might have been on. I don't know. That's interesting. Anyway, so the rest of this video, I'm going to go over the rest of the cast as to like, dislike, mid-season, post-season. And this is just the respondents who filled out the survey that I put on my channel. This doesn't represent the audience. It represents mostly a sample of my audience, right? So there's that. But I'm going to go over the rest, and I'm also going to go over the hot takes that y'all had. So if you want to listen or watch the rest of this episode, become a member. Otherwise, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.